Hello and welcome to episode 30 of the Thought Leadership Podcast and live show. And today I'm so excited to be here with Daniel Gefen, who is a master podcast host, podcast guest, and actually also the co-founder of Podbooker, which is one of the sites where you can find guests for yourself and also find amazing hosts that are allowing you to share your message even further. He's also the founder of Gefen Media Group and host of the popular podcast show Can I Pick Your Brain? A serial entrepreneur, many different projects, very creative, very visionary, and I'm really excited to have you on today, Daniel. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you so much, Daria, for giving me the opportunity to lock myself away in a room away from my 5 children who are going nuts in the house.
We're going to come to that as well, because I think it's amazing that you are, creating all this and you're also raising, entrepreneurial kids. I mean, we're going to talk a bit more about your stories about that, but thank you for taking this time. So I want to talk first and foremost about how you got started. And I know that you have a very popular show yourself. So a lot of podcasts, hosts talk about the length, they're building up their podcast and building up and they're trying different things. And from what I heard in the industry, it takes a bit of a time before you have this big breakthrough or, even if you're consistent. Would you like to talk about, can you remember your own breakthrough and when you had that moment when the momentum came with your own show?
Yeah. So I guess I'll give you a little bit of sort of the backstory. About 5 years ago, I was playing tennis and I get a phone call out of the blue. And this guy says to me, Daniel, I heard you have an interesting business story. I'd like to have you on my podcast. And I'll never forget my response to him. I said to him, what the heck is a podcast? Right. So I had absolutely no idea what a podcast was. And also, just to give you context, at that time, I had no social media following. I was completely invisible online. If you type my name, Daniel Gefen, into Google, it wouldn't show up with anything. I had no email list, so no network, nothing. I had a successful business that was offline. And so he explains to me what a podcast was, and I got very excited because, I thought, wow, this is an interesting opportunity to get on a show and talk about my story, and let's see what happens. Let's have some fun, right? So I went on this podcast and I started just talking about my upbringing, and I really started to open up about things that I actually never opened up publicly about, which was pretty awesome, and pretty much just fell in love with the microphone and just sort of being able to share. And at the end, it felt like it was 5 minutes, and an hour went by, and the host said, "Well, Daniel, thank you so much for being on the show." And I said, "Well, thank you so much for having me on." But I had this one question in my head, right? I'm sitting there in my pajamas, staring at a blank wall. And besides for this guy and his mother, who else is listening to this, right?
Yeah.
So I said, I hope you don't mind me asking, but how many people are listening to this? And he said, well, there's over 1,000 people. And I almost fell off my chair. I said, are you serious? Did you just say 1,000 people? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, where are these people? Yeah. He said, they're all over the world. He starts listing all these countries. And I just had this crazy, realization that I had no speaking experience. I had no audience, 0 following, nothing. And here I am in my pajamas talking to over 1,000 people all over the world. And you have some of the biggest speakers, they travel the world and they get on stage. And if they've got 1,000 people in the audience, that's a packed crowd, right?
Yeah.
So I thought, this is insane. I need to get into podcasting. So 2 weeks later, I started my own podcast. I had no idea what I was doing. Literally just didn't know. I just bought myself a headset and just asked one of my friends, hey, do you want to be a guest on my podcast? And he's like, what's a podcast, right?
What year was this?
This was 5 years ago.
Okay.
This is 5 years ago. So 5 years ago, most people didn't know what a podcast was. Today, there's over 150 million Americans listening to podcasts regularly, and there's over 1.5 million podcasts out there. But this, 5 years ago, most people didn't know. Most people didn't know what a podcast was. And I had two issues, two struggles. Number one, is, you know, the show was all about essentially interviewing the most successful, business entrepreneurs. And the problem was I didn't know any. I had a very, very small network. I didn't know any, big successful business leaders. And the show was called Can I Pick Your Brain? And the goal was to pick the brains of the most successful business leaders. So that was number one. How do I get guests for my podcast? Number two is, how do I get people to listen to this? Like, I don't know how to build an audience. I've never done that before. And it's not like I can go on social media and post. I didn't even have a social media account at that point.
Wow.
So what do I do? Right. So that's when I had this sort of aha moment where I said, well, hold on a second. I was on that guy's podcast and he had over 1,000 people listening. So why don't I just get on other people's podcasts as a guest, and I'll just talk about my story, and then I'll talk about my podcast, and hopefully I'll attract people to listen to my show. So essentially I was leveraging other people's audiences instead of having to try to figure it all out myself and build my own audience by myself. I just went and sort of borrowed other people's existing audiences to then come and follow me and listen to my show. Well, within a very short period of time, my podcast went to over 300,000 downloads. We got to the top 50 on iTunes, and I ended up interviewing 4 billionaires, the smartest man alive, the leading hostage negotiator for the FBI, the US memory champion, and then some incredible people that you've probably heard of, like Robert Kiyosaki from Rich Dad Poor Dad, and Russell Brunson from ClickFunnels, and Billy Jean is marketing. You probably heard of all these names. And these are people who, before I had my podcast, I would never have in a million years thought that I'd be able to have conversations with these people, and not only have conversations with them, but have them in my contact list, have them as part of my network. So that was the first thing that happened. And then the next thing that happened was I started getting bombarded with emails from PR agencies and book publicists trying to get their clients on my show as a guest. And I'd get dozens of these emails a day, and I would just send them all to spam because they basically sucked. Like, they had no, number one, there was two problems. Number one is they didn't have a relationship with me.
Yeah.
So I didn't know who they were. They didn't know who I was. And number two is they didn't know how to position their clients in a way that made them attractive to me, right? I just saw them all as very much the same. They all just sounded the same. Hey, I've got a client, and, she wrote a book, how to make $1 million in 2 years. I was like, it's just the same old, same old.
Yeah.
And so after about a couple of months of me getting all these pitches, I woke up one day, this is about 4 years ago, and I had another aha moment, which was, no one's doing a good job of this in the podcasting space. I've got my own top-rated podcast. My friends are top-rated hosts, so I've got the relationships and contacts. I've been a guest at that point on over 60 podcasts, and I've interviewed over 150 high-profile guests. So I know what a great guest should sound like and what they should look like. Why don't I start my own podcast booking agency? And that's how Gefen Media Group was born. We were one of the first to come onto the market.
Amazing. And I love that, it was quite organic in the beginning. You're saying you came into it and you start to, interview your friends, and then that understanding that, wow, this is much bigger than I thought. And I like what you mentioned, and it's something I haven't heard before, but leveraging other people's show, yes, but when you were talking about growing your show, so many times I've heard people talking about leveraging a podcast show to either send people back to your Facebook group or to an opt-in. But what you are saying here is that you actually leverage other people's shows to grow your show, and that's a very interesting idea. I mean, it went fast for you to grow it that way. And at what point did you felt the confidence? Because there's a kind of an imposter syndrome that I hear quite often, when someone is growing their brand and wanting to invite someone, and they want to respect their time, and they want to, but still they're curious. Like, at what point did you feel like, okay, I have a good leverage of my show, and I have, or did you just go for it? Did you just go and start pitch the bigger names? How did you go about that?
Yeah. So I think when you're keeping track that's when that's usually what holds a lot of people back. When you're constantly keeping track of how many people are listening, and how many likes do I have, or how many followers, or how many, it holds people back, because then you're constantly sort of being demotivated, because you see the next person has more followers than you, or they're making more money than you, or they have and for me, I was just having fun. Like, that's the thing. I was really just having fun with it, and I wasn't so focused on getting the big guests. I didn't think I would ever get the kind of guests that I ended up getting. And in a way, I feel like, because I didn't have this sort of mindset of, I need to get Robert Kiyosaki on my podcast, or I need to get Russell Brunson, or I need to get Les Brown. Like, because I didn't have that kind of, like, I need to do that, otherwise it's not worth doing this. I was able to keep going, and because I was able to keep going, you play the long game, and the long game always wins.
Yes.
And I'll give you a perfect example, by the way, and this is kind of controversial right now, but Bitcoin, okay? And I'm not giving advice here on Bitcoin, so please don't make any decisions based on what I say. I have no idea about Bitcoin. I don't know what I'm talking about. However, I know one thing. I can see, looking back, I could see the data. I could see the data. So I actually was just watching, just before we went live on here, I was watching a YouTube video from a billionaire who was talking about Bitcoin. And this is back in December 2017. Okay, so just around 2018, they were interviewing him about what he thinks about Bitcoin. Now, when he gave his opinion, Bitcoin was at around $14,000 to $15,000 a coin. And he was saying how, because the person who interviewed him said, am I too late? Are we too late to get in? And he said, no. If you're playing the long game, you're not too late, because in the next 4 to 5 years, it's going to be about $100,000 a coin. And within 20 years, he predicts it's going to be $1 million. It will go up to around $1 million a coin. Now, sounds outrageous, right?
Yeah.
But I'm sitting in 2021 right now.
Yeah.
And today, if you go on Google and type in Bitcoin, price, it's $52,000 a coin.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. I went onto the Bitcoin tracker or whatever, the stock, and I looked at the price 6 months after this guy gave his opinion. It dropped down to $3,000 a coin. So now let's imagine that you go back to 2018 and you watch this YouTube video and you see this guy giving his opinion about Bitcoin and saying how you're not too late, you got to get in, now's the time. And you go out and you buy and you take your savings, whatever, and you invest in Bitcoin. You're like, okay, I'm going in. And you wait, and 1 month goes by and it starts to drop. And 2 months goes by and it drops even more. And 3 months goes by and suddenly it's worth $3,000. And you're going nuts. Like, oh my God, why did I listen to this guy? And then you sell. You sell because you're like, I got to get out, got to get out. Today, you'd be kicking yourself like crazy because, oh my God, why didn't I hold on?
Yeah.
Because today it's worth 50,000. So I don't know where Bitcoin's going to go. I'm just using this as an analogy.
Yeah.
To answer your question, I think we're impatient.
Yes.
I think most people are impatient and they want to see results straight away. If I start a podcast, I need to get 1,000 downloads an episode in the first, within the first 6 months. I need to get there. I need to have I need to get on Joe Rogan's show. It's just not going to have, these are unrealistic.
Yeah.
It's unrealistic. When you do something because you enjoy doing it and you see the opportunity in the long run, you're going to be way better off, right? This is the classical story of the tortoise and the hare that I teach my kids a lot. It's the tortoise and the hare, right? That the hare is super fast and he's impatient. He wants to get to the finish, and the hare, the tortoise is just taking it slow and easy and going the long run, and he wins the race.
Absolutely.
And that's it.
And I like the analogy as well with Bitcoin because there is also some conversations going on. Is it too late to go into podcasting? Because podcasting, the early age of podcasting, is it still on, or has it gone? And is it Clubhouse the new thing? There's always this
Yeah.
rush after the next big thing, and it can also become like there's a FOMO. Am I missing out? But at the same time, not committing to the core principle of what actually podcasting is about. It's not about only about the listeners. It's about the opportunity you have to speak with brilliant minds, to create a network, long-term friendships, collaborations. And I mean, from what I hear is that one of your principles that also came with growing a big community and network and podcast. Your Podbooker is one of the bigger sites to get booked and book on book a guest for podcast. But there's a question of what is actually important, because there's one thing with having views and listeners, but you also talk a lot about the connections and the links you are creating with the people. Can you see that it had an impact on your, your entrepreneurial life, on your business, on your friendship? Do you feel like it has kind of elevated you and created space for you to have this conversation that will take you to the next level?
Yeah, so there's no question that obviously when you create a platform for other people, and that's essentially what having your own podcast does, right? Is that you create a platform for other people to be able to give other people the platform. And that's in a way, if you think about it, that's how I was able to get such big, guests, is because I waited for the opportunity to give them the platform when they needed it. And I think that's a very big tip. So a lot of people say, how do I get these big guests? And my advice is wait till they are coming out with a new book, or wait till they are, launching a new service or a charity or something like that. And then reach out to them and say, hey, I'd love to promote your book, charity, new service, whatever it is that they've just come out with. And that's when you're way more likely to get them to say yes, because they're in promotion mode. They are in they're right now wanting to promote this thing heavily. And so your platform is just giving them access to another audience. Now, you'd be surprised, most guests don't ask how big your audience is. For some reason, they don't ask. I've had, like I said, I've interviewed hundreds of people, and very few have ever asked me, how many people are listening? Like very few ask that question. I think if you just deliver a quality podcast and you put out enough episodes, if you've got a decent amount of episodes out, then the guests will be happy to be on your show, because again, like I said, you're giving them a platform. But I want to go back to something that you mentioned, which I think is even more important than all of this. You talked about how there's a problem of FOMO. How you have, Bitcoin, it's like, should I invest? Should I not invest? And I'm struggling with that right now. I have not invested in Bitcoin, and I am watching people on Facebook and people on, in my network telling me, oh my God, I invested when it was only $1,000 and look at it now. And I'm going, oh my goodness, what should I do? And I'll be honest with you, when Clubhouse came out, for the first 3 months, I didn't go on it, but I was just feeling so much anxiety around, I need to be on it because everyone's going crazy about this thing. And then I went on it, and I felt very anxious because I didn't like the platform. I felt like it was way too noisy, and I just felt like it, and I still feel that way. But the truth is, and this is really important, one of your greatest assets, besides for time, is well-being. Your sense of well-being is your greatest asset. And if you're doing something that's causing you anxiety, if it's causing you to feel sick, if it's causing you mental anguish, then you need to step away. You need to just take a step away from it, because your sense of well-being, your state of mind is so important. You cannot be creative when you are under pressure, when you're under this feeling of, I need to do this and I need to do that because everyone's doing it. You can't be creative, and your creative power is your superpower. That's what makes you, and I say you each person listening to this unique, is your personal superpower, is your creativity. It's how you think, it's how you do things. And when you're trying to follow everyone else and you're being pressured into doing things, you no longer are expressing you. You are now expressing the masses. You're now just basically mimicking what everyone else is doing. And when you do that, you feel uncomfortable. And when you feel anxious and when you feel uncomfortable, it is a sign that your inner self, your core being, is basically tapping you on the shoulder saying, warning, this is not good. This is not good for you. So I made a mistake. The mistake I made was I posted publicly that I'm leaving Clubhouse and that I'm never going to invest in Bitcoin. And the reason why I said this, and I made a mistake, and I'll explain to you why I made the mistake and what I've changed about it. And this is the beautiful thing about being a human being, is that we can always evolve and we can always change. We can make decisions and then we can change and decide, no, that's not the right thing. I'm going to do this, and we can grow from it. And you know what? People ask me about my book. I wrote a book 3 years ago called The Self-Help Addict. Now, the reason I didn't mention it, right, is because I don't promote that book because, quite frankly, I'm embarrassed by that book because I wrote it 3 years ago and I've matured a lot hopefully in the last 3 years. And so the way that I wrote that book was, there was a lot of ego in there, and there was a lot of sort of my own agenda in the book. Now, the truth is, I don't regret writing the book because at every stage in your life, you can only do the best you can at that stage. So today, if I write a book, and hopefully I'll write a book in the next year or two, which again, I'll be embarrassed by in 3 years, hopefully.
Yes,
you should
hopefully.
hope to be embarrassed by something that you wrote 3 years ago, because if you're not,
you're not evolving.
Then you're not evolving, right? So the point that I made in my post was, I'm leaving Clubhouse and I'm never investing in Bitcoin because I'm not going to follow the masses, and because I think it's too noisy and it's too distracting, and I don't personally feel comfortable on Clubhouse or doing or investing in Bitcoin. And then I was meditating one day, and it suddenly occurred to me that it's not all or nothing. And nothing is pure evil. Money isn't evil, and it's not good. It just is. It's just a resource that's in the world that you can either use for good or use for bad. And it's the same thing with anything. You name me anything and I'll show you. Food. Is food good or bad? It's amazing. It keeps you alive. It's terrible. It kills people if you eat too much. So, and you see that with everything. So the same thing with Clubhouse. Clubhouse reminds me of Facebook about a year ago, 2 years ago, when I was on Facebook and I was addicted to it. And I would literally sit on that feed for hours a day, checking what everyone's doing. And I'd get anxiety because I'd be comparing myself to them, because I'd be going, oh my God, that guy's already, he already made, this much money and I'm not there yet. Oh my goodness, this person already has this many followers and I'm not there yet. Oh my goodness, this person looks so, attractive and I don't look as attractive as them. And they always look attractive. Like, why is it that every picture they look perfect? Well, maybe it's because they filter everything and they take the perfect angle. I mean, whatever. But the point is, it all looks rosy, and it really messed me up. And I was constantly checking for approval. Whenever I would post, I would see who liked my stuff and who commented and this. And I had to remove myself. But what happened was, I realized that Facebook is also a very big opportunity, because I'm networking with people. I'm getting business from people that I network with on Facebook. There's good things for it. So what I made a decision was, I'm going to go on there as a creator, and I'm going to go on there with a purpose. Here's the key: be intentional with everything that you do.
Yes.
So when I go on Clubhouse now, I go on there to run a room and to do a co-host, like we're going to be doing, Daria, on Sunday. We're going to be co-hosting a room, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to go on there. We're going to co-host a room, and then I'm going to get the heck off, because I don't want to be hanging around with all the noise,
Yeah.
right? If I invest in Bitcoin, I'm going to invest a certain amount of money that I'm okay with losing, meaning if it totally goes and drops and dies, I'm not going to lose everything. I'm just going to leave it in there. And I'm not going to obsess over it. I'm not going to do what everyone else is doing, which is look at Bitcoin. What's happening to it? What's happening? I'm not going to go there. I'm not interested. So
Yes.
I think that's so key.
So important lessons, and I can really relate to that because I'm an Android. I didn't have an iPhone before Clubhouse, and with my partner and I, we've been a couple for 11 years, or co-founders for 10. And what we've been doing throughout the years is that intention of, it's not what you're doing, it's how you're doing it. And before getting on Clubhouse, we actually sat down and said, why are we doing this? What's the intention behind this? Are we doing it because of FOMO? Are we doing it because, how am I coming in? And it has to do with that purpose of, and you mentioned ego as well. Like, are we doing it for our own ego? Is it that because we want to be seen, or is it we want to be heard? Are we feeling that we are missing out on all the anxiety that's coming up? And then you can really recheck in with yourself that you are in alignment and the values. And I've been coming back to these keywords in the interviews throughout the whole week, actually, values and ethics, and like really being in alignment with yourself, because there's so many ways to get distracted and there's so many ways to get off track. But in the long term, if you are feeling off in your mental health, has a lot to do with how much you are in alignment with what you really stand for and why you're doing something. And I want to mention as well, because I think it's very interesting with the podcast, being a podcast host and choosing your guest. There is one way of doing it that has to do with, I really want to connect with this person because I like their mission. And one is about getting something from them. And so the way I'm doing is that I actually have a meditation in the morning that has to do with creativity. You mentioned that as well. That has to do with my visionary thinking. And my visionary thinking has to do with me expanding and not taking. It's about how can I, make an action from a place of creator, from a place of visionary, from a place of connecting, not from a place of taking or having, it's not for my ego. So when I write down the list of my guests, I write down it in the morning when I meditate. And then I go back again and I say, and I cross the names that are coming from pure ego. And I only keep the names of the guests that I truly want to connect with. They might be successful or not, it doesn't matter. If I wrote down the name and I am true to myself saying, actually, I'm not doing it from the right place, I will cross their name and I will not reach out to them. And that has been for me, leading to having amazing conversation where I feel in alignment because I literally want to connect with this person.
I love that. Yeah, look, I've interviewed some big name people, for example, who had huge egos, and unfortunately, I have to say it, but I much prefer to interview someone who's not well known, who doesn't have a big ego, and I get a lot more from them because some of these big name guests that everybody's heard of, they're just very scripted. They're just coming on to promote their thing, and they've been on hundreds of podcasts, and they're just going to give you the same script, the same spiel. There's no heart in there. There's no connectivity there. There's no human connection, and they don't share your episodes, so you're not even getting the advantage of their big network. They're not interested in sharing your episode. Who are you? It's the sad reality. Whereas somebody who maybe nobody's heard of, but they have like a small following, they're going to come on, they're going to give their all, they're going to make a human connection with you, they're going to be relatable to the audience, and they're going to share it with their following. It may not be a massive following, but they're sharing it, and that means your podcast is getting out there even more. So I think that people should start small and build themselves up over time, whether it's starting a podcast or whether it's being a guest on podcasts. Just get on. There's a lot of small podcasts out there that are looking for guests. And I'm telling you that right now, podcasts is the most undervalued attention. It's the most undervalued attention. And it's free. It's free to get on other podcasts. Like right now, I'm not paying you, Daria, to be on this show. I should, because look at the value that you're giving me. You're giving me access to your entire audience. You've produced this podcast. How long have you been doing the podcast for now?
For about A year, but more actively 6 months. Yeah.
So let's say about a year of planning and
Yeah.
preparing and
Yeah.
promoting and doing
Yeah.
all that work. So you've spent an entire year putting this together, and you got to do all the editing and the promotion and all
Yeah.
of that work. And here comes Daniel, and in less than an hour, I get to reap all those benefits, and I don't pay anything for it, right? So I really want to make this clear to everyone listening to this. If you're thinking about, should I get on podcasts now or should I wait? You've got to jump on it now, because I believe that within the next 18 months, it's going to get expensive, because I believe that podcast hosts are going to start charging the guests to be on their show. And so right now, take advantage while you still can, and also take advantage while it's not oversaturated.
Yeah.
Because there's so many people that still don't understand how powerful it is to be a guest on a podcast. And so right now is the time to get on those podcasts before, again, like Facebook and like Google and like Instagram and like YouTube, once they become saturated and everyone's doing it, it's much harder to be. So right now we're still in the early stages. People talk about how, oh, but there's over 1 million podcasts, so maybe I'm too late. I want you to think about this for a moment. How many YouTube videos are there out there? Forget about videos. How many video channels are there? There's 100 million YouTube channels. And guess how many blogs there are? There's over 1 billion blogs.
Wow.
So now compare 1 million podcasts to over 100 million YouTube channels and over 1 billion blogs. That's nothing.
No.
We're just getting started.
Yeah.
So you're not late at all. You're actually early to the game still. And I would right now, if I were you, if you're wanting to build your brand, if you're wanting to build your credibility in your space, and if you're wanting to build a following, then there is absolutely nowhere that you're going to get more attention than being a guest on podcasts. And I'll explain why. Because the attention span right now, in general, is about 8 seconds. That's the average attention span today. That's 1 second less than a goldfish, by the way. Okay, it's pathetic, right? Yeah. Now, on social media, it drops down to about 3 seconds. That means that if you're on social media and you're posting something, you've got Susie sitting on the toilet scrolling through her Instagram feed, and you might get 1 or 2 seconds of her attention, and that's it. You're finished. You're gone. What's that worth? Nothing. It's worth nothing. Okay. How many views you get on a video, or how many, it's worthless. It's all vanity metrics. It's nothing. But let's contrast that to podcasting for a minute. Over 85% of people, and by the way, if you hear my baby in the background, I apologize, but get used to it. It's COVID. Right. I love the fact that we're all on lockdown, because now I love it
too. It's human.
Yeah, I can make an excuse now. It's like my kids are in the background. It's okay. It's COVID. Oh, there's a dog barking. It's COVID. Oh, I'm not leaving the house. It's COVID, whatever. Anyway, so with podcasts, over 85% of people that listen to podcasts listen from the beginning to the end. They listen to the whole episode, and the average episode is 45 minutes long.
Yeah.
That means that you've got someone's undivided attention for 45 minutes in a generation that the average attention span is 8 seconds. Do you understand? That's a gold mine.
Yeah.
The gold mine. That means, by the way, that we've now been recording for how long? 30 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever it is. Okay. So if someone is still listening to this, that means that they've been listening to me for the last 30 to 40 minutes. You cannot get that kind of attention anywhere. There's no other medium.
Not even Clubhouse, because the attention in the Clubhouse, I think, is quite shattered, because you can, the fact that you can do things at the same time and there are people coming in and out. I'm not really sure how many people actually listen to others and then when they are not speaking themselves as well, because if you can be and you're always on and there is no end to it, it's impossible for our brain to keep the concentration and focus.
Agreed, because people on Clubhouse mainly want to speak.
Yeah.
And so when the person's waiting to speak, they're not really listening to anyone else. They're just thinking about what they want to say. With podcasts, the people who are listening have decided to tune in because they want to learn something.
Yes.
They are
Absolutely.
loyal followers of you, Daria, because you put out a great podcast, you interview great guests, you know how to interview, and they like your style, and they relate to you. And
Mm.
so because of that, they keep coming back and they keep listening to the podcast. And that is gold. If you go on someone's podcast and they have you as a guest, you get instant credibility because the people listening trust the host.
Yes.
It's like when Michael Jordan wears a pair of Nikes. Now everyone goes out to buy them because, oh, if Michael Jordan can slam dunk with my Nikes, it's got nothing to do with the fact that he's, I don't know, 7'11", whatever. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
you know. But that's why podcast guesting is so powerful right now. There is so many reasons to be going on, and people make excuses. I've heard so many excuses of why not. Oh, I don't like the sound of my voice. You know, when I started podcasting, I hated the sound of my voice. I hated it. I couldn't listen to it. I sounded like a whiny little girl. I don't know. For some reason, that's just how I sounded to me, right?
Mm.
Today, after being on so many podcasts and recording, I actually like the sound of my voice. And I say that without, trying to be sound arrogant, but I mean that genuinely. I've
Mm.
come to like the sound of my voice. I grew up emotionally abused. I was bullied in high school, and throughout basically my whole childhood, I was very depressed on the inside. On the outside, I would pretend that I was happy. So I was this, hey everyone, how you doing? Clown. I was the
Mm.
class clown. I would jump up on tables and do all that stuff. But inside, I was very, very, very sad and very depressed. I was craving attention. I didn't get attention at home. I didn't get the right type of attention in school. Everybody pretty much just sort of made fun of me and would, use me as the monkey. And I've had to grow to like myself. I've had to
Mm.
go through a process of not just, you know, liking myself, but falling in love with the person who I am.
Mm.
You can't fall in love. People talk about falling in love with people all the time. You can't fall in love with someone until you fall in love with yourself. You don't know what
Sure.
love is.
Yeah.
And so getting on podcasts is a great way to get to know who you are.
Ah.
I see people saying, I don't know what I can offer. I don't know who I am yet. How can I go on podcasts? No, no. You go on podcasts and you'll start to discover who you are
Yes.
and what you have to offer. And I don't
Yes.
care if you go on 50 podcasts and then you totally just mess up. Who cares? No one's going to remember you.
Of course.
We think we're so like, in the grand scheme of things, nobody remembers.
Yes.
They only remember you when you're memorable. And you can't
Mm.
become memorable until you go out there enough and start talking and start sharing. And then you're going to become memorable. Then people are going to know who you are. So
Yes.
start somewhere. Just get on podcasts and just start sharing your stories. There's always someone who's two steps behind you. I don't care where you are in your life. There's always going to be people who are two steps behind you, and you can help them. Those are
Yeah.
the people that you need to help.
And you can change lives. I've heard stories of people listen to episode and who, going through a very rough time. And I mean, the last couple of months have been tough for many people. And an episode that can inspire, that can give you something actionable, something you don't know who's listening. And if there's one person that had to hear your message that day, then you've changed someone's life. And that in itself is worth the whole process. So
Yeah.
we never know who's listening.
You never know who's listening. And I actually had a real story that happened where someone reached out to me. They sent me an email and they said that they were planning to commit suicide that week. They were actually planning their own suicide, and they stumbled upon my podcast episode that I did, and they heard a story that I shared with a guest. And he said, Daniel, I'm turning my life around. I want you to know that your podcast episode has given me motivation to keep going. And I'm going to write a book about my journey. And I'm going to start my own podcast. And I want to just say thank you. Do you know what? I have no word. Like, I don't even know how to How do you value that? How do you value the fact that you don't know that you might say something that you didn't even think was that like powerful? You just shared something, whatever, and someone else heard it, and because of your words, you saved their life. Do you know how powerful that is? Do you know what a responsibility that is on us as humans? Because if you could save someone's life and you don't because you're too afraid, that's irresponsible.
Yeah.
God gave us abilities, and he gave us incredible abilities. And if we don't use them, we're just wasting them. We're going through life selfishly. You're not, see, the problem is people say, oh, you know, I don't want to go on podcast because who am I? Who am I? Who are you? You're God's creation. You don't think God created something special? God doesn't create crap. So stop thinking that way. You know, he created you unique. He created you for a purpose.
And I love the fact that you said that, you know, you might not have thought that that was important, but we are not the one who choose what's important for our audience. We don't decide. We bring our best value, but the one who actually decides what's valuable is not us. It's the one who's listening. It's the one who's watching. And we don't have that control. We don't have that, you know, no matter how much, of course, our goal, our mastery is to show up in our best self and give the best and contribute with our heart and with our skills and our genius. But we don't decide what we are known for. We don't decide who that resonates with. We don't decide what is that keyword, that message, because we don't know who comes into this, you know, the person listening to your episode and that moment, what they were going through with that wording, with that specific moment when they were sitting maybe in the kitchen drinking that coffee and something just clicked in their mind. We cannot create that. That is not our creation. We are co-creating with that moment somehow, I would say. And I think that's the beauty of somehow being a creator, is that you just putting out what's coming through you. Then the rest, you don't have any control over that.
We have to learn to let go. Yeah. This is the whole thing. This is my whole life of searching, right? And that's what we are, right? We're just human beings searching. We're constantly searching. We're searching for truth.
Yeah.
Sometimes we search in relationships. Sometimes we search in money. Sometimes we search in religion. We search in sports. We search in so many different ways. But we're constantly searching. I mean, look at a child. My little 2-year-old is constantly looking and playing and trying this and trying that, experimenting. He's searching. He's curious. Yeah. And if you're still curious, you're very lucky. If you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and you're still searching and you're still curious, wow, incredible. Because it means that you still have meaning in your life. You have a purpose. You're searching for something. You don't necessarily have to find it. That's the thing. No one said you have to necessarily find it. If you're searching, you're still alive. If you stop searching, you're dead. You're sleepwalking. Then you don't even exist. You're just a robot doing whatever if you stop searching.
Yes. And podcasting is an amazing tool for that, to stay creative, to stay curious, because you can really use it as a vehicle for curiosity, a vehicle for creation. I mean, it has so much in it. And as you mentioned, it's still early days, so you have access to remarkable people that you can have this co-creation and creativity with. You can be curious with amazing people all over the world. I mean, it's a golden opportunity to really grow, and it's kind of also a self-development tool. It's not only about, we talk a lot about how can you leverage that, how can I get back, there's this kind of more superficial or more like the golden opportunities kind of things that we see. But if we go beyond that, we can see that actually there's so much meaning in using podcasting as a tool of curiosity, like you mentioned, creation, also purpose, and you can also check in with your alignment. There's so much in it. It's again like Clubhouse you mentioned, or Bitcoin. It's not what you do, it's how you do it, and what is the question behind why you actually started with that. So I love this conversation, Daniel. I am having such a great time with you, and going deep into, you know, the philosophy and the deeper meaning of podcasting. I would love to ask you a last question for today, and that has to do with choosing your guests, because we spoke about that before, that you know, you spoke about the names, but how can you create a good, you know, relationship network with guests? How can you reach out to them authentically? Because I know that Gefen Media, your other company, is a lot about how to you actually pitch to be a guest on the podcast. But there's a way to pitch that which is cold and now scripted, but there's also a way to create a real connection and real meaning in the way you approach a potential guest. So can you give any advice? How can someone reach out if they want to have someone on the show and the show is not big enough, or they feel like, you know, imposter, or if some reason they are, you know, reaching out to bigger guests? How can they do that in a way that is authentic and respectful, and at the same time, you know, showing the leverage that that person can have?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, I'll answer the question, but also I'll answer it for both someone who is looking for a guest for their show and someone who wants to be a guest, because I think the answer is the same.
Yeah.
My first answer is, like I said before, find, if you're starting out, find smaller podcasts, find guests that are not well known, because you've got to start somewhere. Everyone has to start somewhere. And the reason why I created Podbooker is because I realized that there are so many hosts that are looking for guests and they don't know where to find them. And there are so many people wanting to get on podcasts, but they can't afford to hire an agency to get them booked on the big shows. And they can't get on the big shows because they're not yet, you know, established. They haven't built up their credibility. So, but how do they find the small shows? There's nowhere, there's no platform that you can find them. So that's why I created podbooker.com. And in terms of reaching out, when you're reaching out to someone who's a smaller podcast, you're way more likely to be accepted as a guest because they're looking for guests. They need content. They need people. And if you are a podcast host and you're looking for guests, so let's say you go on Podbooker and you search for guests on there, most of those guests are going to say yes to you because they are looking to get on podcasts. They're also starting out. So essentially, you're helping each other.
Yeah.
If you're a host and you need a guest, or you're a guest and you need a host, you're helping each other. You both need from the value that each one is giving to the other. And that's why I really am so excited about Podbooker and the potential for it. We've already got now over 2,000 users, and we've had over 5,000 podcast booking requests already through the platform. And this is in 3 months. This is in 3 months. So, but the reason why that is happening is because we are going for a market that hasn't been served yet. This is a market that hasn't been served. To answer your question further about how do you reach out, my answer to you is like this. I want to keep it very simple. People try too hard to impress when they're trying to pitch someone, whether it's pitching a guest to be on your show or whether it's pitching to be a guest on someone's show. We try to use all these like fancy terms and we try to, you know, just be genuine. There is nothing greater than someone who just comes across as real and genuine and shares something vulnerable about themselves. Vulnerability goes a long way, number one. Number two, use humor. Like if you're funny or if you like to have a laugh, which I think a lot of people do, right? You know, you like to have a laugh with our friends. So do that. Just be comfortable. Be comfortable, because here's the biggest lesson I can give. The biggest lesson of all lessons I can give on pitching, it actually comes from someone who I interviewed on my show, a guy called John Buchan, who he had, I guess, an agency that he was trying to get clients who were Fortune 500 executives. So we're talking about very hard people to get a hold of. We're talking about Pepsi, Disney, Coca-Cola, like Universal Studios, like very tough, you know, big companies that are very hard to get into. And he got drunk one night. And while he was drunk, he went to his laptop and he wrote an email and he hit send. He didn't realize he was doing this. He was drunk. And he wrote out an email. It was a crazy email. And he sent it to 100 people who he had in his CRM, in his list of people to contact. And we're talking about like big Fortune 500 executives. And then he basically passed out. The next morning, he woke up, he opens up his laptop, and he vaguely remembers, he's like, did I do something stupid last night? I know I did something stupid. And he opens up and he sees, oh my goodness me, he sees the email that he sent out and he was petrified. He's like, oh my God, I can't believe I sent this email. Am I crazy? And then he went into his inbox and he saw about 50 responses. So half of the people he sent it to. And we're talking about, he has screenshots. So that one of the chief executives in Pepsi, so one of the big in Disney, in big companies, they wrote him back saying, John, I get emails every day from salespeople and I get pitched all the time. I've never responded to a single email. And yours is the first one. It was genius. You are a genius. And then he got another email from another person who said, John, I forwarded this to all of my contacts just to show them how incredible this email is. I'd love to get on a call with you. Hey, John, I'd love to have coffee with you. You're a dude. This was an amazing email. Like, wow. What did he do? He just let go of all the crap that everyone thinks you have to do. You just let go of it. Get drunk. Well, you don't have to get drunk.
Yes. Let go.
Get to a state of where you get to when you don't think too much about everything.
Yes.
Be human. These people, whoever they are, chief executives of big Fortune 500 companies, they sit on the crapper like you do. They have problems at home with their kids. They worry about all the same types of things. They're human beings. Talk to people like human beings, and you will see that people will respond.
I love this story, and probably they connected with what they want to be. You know, they want to be able to be free and express themselves and be fun. And I really thought when you were talking about this, I was thinking about the documentary Jim and Andy. I don't know if you have seen that on Netflix.
Yes.
I love that documentary. And he talks about that
Jim and Andy.
When he's connecting with the audience in the beginning of his career, he's thinking, what do they want? What do they want? And he said, they want to get rid of their concerns. So I have to become it. And that was such an eye-opening phrase for me, because it's not about trying to, impress them. It's about, who do I need to become? Well, I have to become vulnerable. I have to become funny. Who am I really if I let go of all this, expectations of who I need to be, because I think they are so advanced and I have to speak to them at a specific level. But if I come in really in my best self and just am myself and connect with them on a human level, that's something they haven't seen before.
I love that. And I need to watch that documentary again, because I really loved it, but I don't remember it. But I remember I loved it. So I need to check it out.
I think I stopped like 20 times, and we sat down with my partner and like, oh, this is really, and I mean, it just there are moments in times when you watch something and it just resonates with you. And I think that, I would say that we can absolutely relate that to your story about the meaning of the connection, actually being able to speak yourself, which is actually the scariest thing we can do. So a good invitation to practice letting go. Well, Daniel, this has been such a pleasure and a gift, and thank you so much for being on my show. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and your lessons and insights. And I would love for people to explore more of your world. So where can people find you? Where can they go deeper and discover what you're working on at the moment?
Well, the best next action that I think everyone should take is to go to podbooker.com. It's free to sign up as a guest, and it's free to sign up as a host, and you can sign up as both. And I would highly, highly recommend that you start pitching to be on a podcast today. Like, make it your goal today. Get over whatever it is that you are, needing to get over. Just get over it and just go on Podbooker, find a podcast, pick any one. Don't even get smart about which one. Just pick one.
Yeah.
You get 10 pitches for free. So I would just pitch 10 podcasts today. We have a 25% acceptance rate on the platform, which means that
Amazing.
roughly out of the 10 pitches that you will send today, you will probably get you can expect to get around 2 to 3 or even 4 potentially podcasts that you will be booked on as a guest. And just start getting on podcasts, get yourself out there, start to develop yourself, and start to develop your brand, start to discover your voice and discover who you are and what you can offer, and just start putting yourself out there. It's the only way to do this. It's not rocket science. Nobody's going to be able to do it for you. You're the only person that can do this. It's on you, and you are valuable.
Yes.
Someone needs to hear you. And so you're just doing a disservice to others if you're not doing it. So go out there and, most importantly, have fun.
Yes.
That's it. Like, just go and have fun. Don't think too much about it. Just have fun. Get drunk without needing the alcohol. That's my message.
Yes.
Get drunk without the alcohol.
Wonderful. Yes. And we're going to share that in the show notes. You can find and go and check it out right now. What we always love with this episode is that you take action, even if it's the smallest action. If you just sit down and think, okay, what is the one thing I can do today? And you don't even have to think this time what to do, because we know exactly what to do. Get on Podbooker, get your profile up and start exploring and just have fun. And you will feel so empowered. You'll feel so happy about you sharing your voice. You are sharing your creativity, and we need to hear you now today more than ever. So this is our invitation for you guys today. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. If you love this, please subscribe to our channel on iTunes and on YouTube, and comment below what is your main takeaway and what is your show going to be about. If you're having your own show, put it below so we can discover it. If you want to be on shows, what type of interviews would you like to do? Maybe there's going to be some collaboration already in the comments below. And of course, check out Podbooker. Thank you, Daniel. It has been a true pleasure to have you on. And until next time.
Thank you, Daria.